Good evening, everybody. We're about to begin a live broadcast of the Israel Now, Never Again live podcast series. Our host is Meir Weinstein, who's the founder of Israel Now, as well as a past director of the GADL Canada. We're also going to have a guest with us, Jeff Flax, who's a CUNY law professor, chair of the Department of Business, as well as the administrator of the SAFE, which he'll tell us a little bit about. He's also a campus anti-Semitism expert. So I'm going to make a couple of quick points, and then we're going to start our show. My first question is regarding the topic tonight, is the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, a message to Israel and the Jewish people. So question number one I have regarding this whole issue is that when a vice president goes and says Donald Trump opposed reasonable gun safety and cut funding for gun violence, and that she claims to created the first White House Office for Gun Violence Prevention. Obviously, she wasn't very successful as his bullet starts shooting towards our next president's head. He has to be taken down. And so they didn't do a very good job of their Office of Gun Violence if this guy tried to assassinate the president. Of course, the other comment made was that from our present president who yells, attack, attack, attack. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye, said President Biden just a few days before, indeed. And when the progressives go and promote memes like this one, comparing President Trump to Hitler, or allowing the pro-Hamas rallies to burn American flags, what did they expect was going to happen? With your comments, send them in if you can on either Twitter or YouTube or Facebook. And now we're going to bring our guests live onto the screen, and I'll see you guys later in the show.
Hi, good evening, everyone who's watching. Let me just ask everyone if you could please share this on whatever social media platform you use. We'd appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people. Tonight I have with me as a guest Jeffrey Lax, university professor at CUNY. Jeff, it's been a while since I had you on the show. Last time it was certainly before October 7th, and we were talking about how much anti-Semitism there was at your campus and at other campuses, and I'm sure you could fill us in on the severity of how it is right now after October 7th. And then we're going to get into the hope that Donald Trump is reelected, because when he was president, he took a firm stand against pro-Hamas gangs roaming throughout campuses in the United States. Took a firm stand against anti-Semitism, and right now we see, as we discussed on a previous show, that the Biden administration was lecturing the Jewish community who they should include in combating anti-Semitism, and one of the groups that they included was CARE. How outrageous that was. Lecturing us on the issue of racism, anti-Semitism, that we have to embrace people who support Hamas, to school us on the basics. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Mayor. I think that what Biden has done has been extremely demoralizing. Even as recently as a couple of days ago, he was speaking to, I don't know what the audience was. It may have been a pro-anti-Israel, pro-Hamas audience, pro-Palestinian audience, I'm not sure. But even there, he was describing his policy towards Israel and describing Israel as problematic, referring to Israel's government as an extreme, not Netanyahu, but the entire Israeli cabinet as an extreme right cabinet, getting into the politics. I never hear him getting into the politics of any other nation or the problems of the politics of any other nation. But yet a true democracy, a true and free democracy like Israel, talks about their extreme right politics, and basically described Israel as the problem. How quickly we forget the massacre, the barbaric massacre and we all know what happened on October 7th. So that's very demoralizing to hear the President of the United States mostly blame Israel for the lack of peace. And obviously, he has no interest in Israel closing out what they started here, which is the defeat of Hamas. And in his most recent speech, he never mentioned Hamas once. So it kind of tells you where he stands. And you're right, he involved CARE. Now, CARE was eventually kicked out of that initiative that Biden announced because things came out later on where they were saying some unbelievably anti-Semitic thing. I mean, believable to me, but I guess not to the folks in the Biden administration. And a lot of people don't know that some of the top advisors in the Biden administration are pro-terror people. Like literally, I'm not being melodramatic. If you look at, and we're going to put out some research on that soon, very scary who some of the people are who are in the top advisory positions. And those are the people really running America right now, because anyone can tell that Joe Biden is not running America. And so you have these extreme radical leftists who actually support terror groups. And there's one person in particular, and we're going to put this information out soon, who's an advisor at the highest levels of the Biden administration. But even though he didn't have CARE ultimately in the initiative, the anti-Semitism initiative, he used the nexus definition of anti-Semitism, which is also a very unhelpful, very bad definition of anti-Semitism, and mentioned IRA in there, but IRA should be the only definition.
And the person who he appointed as the American envoy on anti-Semitism, Dwara Lipsack, we spoke back then about her that she was pretty much silent about campus anti-Semitism, in particular CUNY, what was going on at your university. And after October 7th, how has she been active? I haven't really read anything about her. What's she been doing?
I don't see too much out of her. I see a lot out of Congress. We don't really hear too much from her. And as you alluded to, CUNY is ground zero for what's going on around the country now. I mean, I've been predicting for about a year now that the way the anti-Semitism fight goes at CUNY is the way it's going to go nationally. And I've never been so sad to be right about anything in my life. I mean, CUNY has not only not approached the anti-Semitism problem and addressed it, they have methodically gone about making it worse. Sally Abdallah is the chief diversity officer at CUNY. She's a former director of CARE Minnesota.
Right.
As if CARE, is, not extreme enough on its own. CARE Minnesota, in particular, is extreme to the extreme. In fact, CARE Central has distanced itself from things CARE Minnesota has said and done. Even recently, CARE Minnesota has some outrageous comments that were put out by one of its people. And she was the leader of the VDS movement at CARE Minnesota. This is who CUNY hires to oversee anti-Semitism across the university. And we are the largest urban university in the entire country. And Sally Abdallah has been employed now for about 2 years. The Department of Education just had a settlement with CUNY that was a total sham that basically allows CUNY to investigate itself. It basically tells CUNY, investigate yourself, redo the It basically says CUNY did not handle anti-Semitism complaints properly and enabled an anti-Semitic environment, which is not surprising, especially when you know who's in charge of discrimination at the university. And they say all this, and then they tell CUNY to go and investigate themselves. So this is the Biden administration. This would not happen under a Ken Marcus Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. But, Biden has still yet to codify, which he promised to do. He promised to make the Trump resolution on Title VI cases in academia, which protects Jews. He promised to make it into law. He's never done that. He pushed it off. Every year he says next year, next year, next year. He's never done it. And that's part of the reason why Department of Education punted on the issue and is telling universities, they're saying one thing in the documents, and instead of finishing the investigation and declaring to the world how bad it is for Jews, they go out and they say to CUNY, go investigate yourselves, which CUNY loves doing. That's their MO. They love investigating themselves and finding that they didn't do anything wrong. And that's what's going on. Some campuses are handling it better nowadays, but most are not, and CUNY certainly is not.
Seems to be a reawakening in the Jewish community, certainly here in Canada. And I'm reading, I'm watching from the grassroots level in the United States Jewish community as well. It seems that the well-paid Jewish leadership is asleep at the switch completely. Over here, we have someone who's been appointed by the Anti-Defamation League from the States that they appointed here in Canada. She lives in Toronto, Emma Smith, to monitor anti-Semitism, to be involved community relations with various different Jewish organizations, active in various synagogues, active in various social organizations in the Jewish community. She has been, it's well documented, expressed support for Ilhan Omar, condemned Jewish groups who have exposed CARE National, groups like that, for their anti-Semitism, for their pretty much support for Hamas. That's from the Anti-Defamation League. What do you see that? Her name is Emma Smith. It's we're going to start a campaign to out her because the people who she wants to come in here to speak. And again, she's been nothing since October 7th on the issue of rabid anti-Semitism. But prior to that, very easy to accuse the Jewish community of racism, Islamophobia, totally disgusting, abhorrent.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Emma Smith, but we have a similar situation in America, sadly. And again, I'm in New York, and New York has been run by far left extremists for a decade now. Even though now polls are starting to show that New York, especially New York Jews, are starting to behave differently at the polls. Lee Zeldin nearly pulled off an enormous upset a couple of years ago of Governor Hochul because people didn't feel she was handling the anti-Semitism problem and because of the crime problem in New York. And New York had not been that close in a statewide election in many, many years. But we're still far away from a New York that could ever elect a Pataki type. There are people who think New York is actually in play for Trump. I'll believe it when I see it. But I do believe you're going to see the strongest Jewish support for a Republican candidate this time around, because a lot of Jews are realizing that the far left has taken over the Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party that was of Bill Clinton. It's just not. And you can say what you will about Bill Clinton, but at that time, there really truly was, and maybe he was a little tougher on Israel than somebody else would have been, but it was still a very, very much pro-Israel party. And that's not the case, obviously, today. It's not just not pro-Israel. So much of the electorate, can see nationally that it's an anti-Israel party. So I think you're going to see some change. I think you're going to see a very strong demographic change in the way Jewish people vote this year nationally and in New York. And I'm very interested to see how much Jews have come around to understand that this Democratic Party has not yet come to grips with their anti-Semitism problem. And I really try very hard not to be political about this. I have my own political views. Yep. I don't think they have a place in discussions about anti-Semitism, but I also have to be honest and call it like I see it. And the Republican Party, to its credit, if a white supremacist comes out, they immediately condemn it, which is the right thing to do. You don't. The Democrats need to do the same thing with the Ilhan Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Cori Bushes, who, by the way, now Cori Bush looks like she's going to lose. So after Bowman lost the election, and again, it was because of his anti-Semitism, now it looks like another squad member is going to lose. And even though that makes me happy, and hopefully that'll happen, and she'll lose, because she has so much vitriol for the state, for Israel, and for the Jewish people there. It's not enough. There's still quite a large contingent, and Biden is still catering to the far left. And so that's the problem. And as long as that keeps happening, where you have mainstream Democrats who used to support Israel supplicating to the far left, especially when he's in trouble now in the election, it's a very scary thing. I mean, Jews are the first ones to be thrown under the bus when somebody needs some help garnering electoral support or support of the country, and that's a horrible thing to see.
The Democrats under Biden, they want Israel to leave Gaza, essentially allow Hamas to remain in power, that Israel should not control the border between Gaza and the Sinai, where the arms were coming in. Probably a lot of those arms were from Afghanistan too, when Biden in a hurry left Afghanistan with the most sophisticated weapons there. Where'd they end up? A lot of them are going to, well, they already said that Hamas has American weapons as well. Where'd they get them from? From there. So Biden wants Israel to pull out. Donald Trump says he'd like Israel just to wipe out Hamas. No question about it. And the Biden administration is pushing Israel that they should accept a two-state solution. Now, think about it. If you speak to anyone normal, like the Trump administration that's hopefully going to take over now, you speak to Republicans, you can explain it very simply. Gaza is a very low, flat area, and Judea and Samaria, what they call the West Bank, is mountainous. In fact, if you visit some of the what they call settlements, Jewish settlements there, you could see from the settlements, because they're elevated, you could see Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. It's overseeing. You could see the airport. In other words, if Israel pulled out of Judea and Samaria and what they call the West Bank, and it was taken over by even Mahmoud Abbas, in conjunction with some form of Hamas, you'll have weapons pointed at major population centers in Israel. It won't be an issue of tunnels. It will be above ground on the hills, firing down. Now, in their educational system, they preach and they teach from birth to their kids, destroy Israel. That's why you and I, any Jew, can't travel to, let's say, Ramallah and say, and we're going to be identified Jewish, we'll wear a kippah or a Magen David, whatever. We're going to go into Ramallah, walk over to whatever cafe we see, and order a coffee. No, good luck. You'll be slaughtered by doing that, because they're taught to kill Jews and destroy Israel. The Biden administration, Israel must accept a two-state solution, a two-state delusion. You're not talking about sitting down and negotiating with people who give and take. No, they don't believe we have any right to be there and to force Israel, to try to force Israel into a two-state solution. Thank God Donald Trump is running, and hopefully he becomes the president again, and Netanyahu just waits it out until he is the president, so we don't have to have these games of death imposed on Israel.
Well, you know, Meir, what you described just now is something that I've always thought about hypothetically for many years. What would happen if a Jew wandered into Ramallah? What would happen if a Jew wandered into the West Bank or Gaza? What would happen? And it's, I don't want to say the word funny because it's hardly funny, but it's no longer hypothetical. I don't know if you saw this in the news a couple of days ago. There was a 70-something-year-old Jewish man who accidentally drove into Palestinian territories, right? And he immediately got bombarded. He was lucky to escape with his life because he was immediately attacked by the surrounding civilians, right? So the civilians in the area saw a Jew, and for those who don't know, you can identify by license plate, I believe, a car that comes in that's an Israeli citizen. And so immediately when they saw that, they attacked, and he was there with his wife. This guy in his 70s, and they tried to kill him. And so this hypothetical of what happens if one Jew ends up in Gaza one day, it's not hypothetical. We saw what happened. They tried to take his life from him immediately. As soon as they recognize a Jew, it is kill him. So we no longer have to describe this as a hypothetical. What happens if they talk about apartheid, for goodness sake, and genocide, for goodness sake, and one Jew wanders into Palestinian territory and nearly loses his life, a 70-year-old man. So it's no longer a hypothetical. It's an example you can give the day a Jew wandered into Palestinian territory. They want us all dead. And, it's unfortunately, people say Hamas, but who voted Hamas in? And who's hiding Hamas behind civilian hospitals, hospitals, civilian homes, kindergartens? Who's allowing weapons to be stored in their homes, again, in schools? And so there's a lot of very culpable civilians too. Now, don't get me wrong. I fully support the victims, the innocent Palestinian civilians, fully. And I do understand that they're victims, and I've always said that. But there is a large percentage of the population that want Jews dead. And I feel bad for the little Palestinian kids who don't know any other way. This is how they're raised. They're taught on their TV shows and in their textbooks and in their societal culture, kill the Jew. You must kill the Jew. And that's a horrible thing because that kid has no chance in life. That kid has no chance to live a moral, ethical, decent life because that's the culture. And so people need to be realistic too. Some people are afraid to say it, but we all need to say it, that the culture has to change too. It's not just getting rid of Hamas, it's changing the culture in those territories to understand that, how crazy is this, that Jews are people.
Yeah, 100%. You can imagine, one of the goals or objectives that Netanyahu put forward is that on the day after, as they call it, there needs to be a process in Gaza similar to the denazification process that took place in Germany after World War II. There needs to be some kind of a de-radicalization, jihadi educational process. How long would that take? That would take years.
Generations.
It will take generations. And while it's going to take generations, what are these Islamic organizations like CARE going to say in the United States while there's an attempt to do this in Gaza? They're going to be saying this is anti-Palestinian racism, that it should be very normal to just teach kill Jews. The challenge is unbelievable.
Well, they're still going to consider Jews to be the oppressors, just like they do in America. When you can consider, and I'm sure I know it's the same way in Canada, when they're defining Jews as oppressors everywhere, not just in Israel. I'm considered an oppressor. when I filed an anti-Semitism investigation with my university, I was placed under investigation for filing an anti-Semitism complaint.
Right.
I was placed under investigation. I don't know how, and not just me, but 3 other professors. By the way, I was exonerated. CUNY wanted to fire me so badly. I don't think the last time we spoke, I had this information. But since then, CUNY hired a multi-million-dollar firm called Stone Turn, multinational multi-million-dollar firm, because they were trying to dig up stuff on me to get me fired. And they actually put me under investigation. I'm not exaggerating, literally because under their definition of anti-Semitism that they were using, the Jerusalem Declaration, which is even worse, if you can imagine it, than the Nexus definition. Under that definition, you can consider a Zionist Jew to be a racist. So that was the basic essential theory under which I was put under investigation. Am I a racist because I'm complaining about anti-Semitism by BDS activists and leaders of CARE, running our university and hiring the people in charge of anti-Semitism? So I was placed under investigation and I was exonerated, but CUNY still refuses to give me the document that explained the process of my investigation, how or why I was exonerated, because I'm sure the outside organization, I was actually lucky. Had CUNY conducted the investigation themselves, they would have dug something up on me, made it up, because there's nothing actually on me that warrants being punished in any way or fired. But luckily, this outside organization, couldn't do something so immoral because it would have reflected on them poorly. And so I was exonerated, but we have demanded the report, me and my lawyers, many times. I still don't have the report. My colleague, who was also placed under investigation with me, was also exonerated. We had complained about the same situation. And there are 2 other professors at CUNY who are still under investigation, again, because the reason for their complaint was based on anti-Zionism.
It's unbelievable. You have Muslims or Arabs that come to the West, and they come from countries that have no Jews, that anti-Semitism is normal. And they bring those values here to North America, in particular to the United States, and they try to get acceptance for this. And they look at Jews, and by the way, there's almost 2 billion Muslims in the world, and there's approximately 15 million Jews in the world. We are a minority, and we're doing all right. Israel's doing all right with its. They have about 7.3 million Jews living in Israel. Israel's doing all right. It's a success story compared to. How is it? Israel strives to be a light to the world, and with all their inventions and technology and Nobel Prizes that Jews win, and we're such a minority. We're like a little tiny ant or a flea compared to this massive Arab world, and it eats them up so much that they detest any of our successes, any of the successes of Israel. The FBI has used Israeli technology to crack the phone of the shooter of Donald Trump. Israeli technology flourishes. And we have to defend ourselves in public life, on campuses, against this blatant anti-Semitism, instead of the government, the Biden administration, doing the right thing to call out that anti-Semitism. They're interested in votes, and they'll throw us under the bus, as they're doing. That's what you're going through on your campus, Islamic anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I refer to it as Islamo-Marxist, Islamo-Marxism, because that's what it is. Right now, there is a convenient relationship between Marxists and radical Islamists. And you think about it for a minute and you wonder, what on earth does an Islamist have in common with a Marxist? Almost nothing.
Right.
Their ideologies are not even remotely overlapping, except in one area, which is that Marxism advocates, and it's really a core tenet of Marxism, the elimination of Judaism. I mean, Karl Marx advocated, yes, he hated all religions, that's true, but he had and wanted all religion, religion is the opiate of the masses, his famous saying, but he had a particular disdain for Judaism and wanted Judaism completely annihilated, and wrote an essay about it on the Jewish question by Karl Marx. And people should really read that, because it echoes Hitler, well before Hitler. I mean, it really is the Hitler doctrine. You almost wonder whether Hitler got a lot of his beliefs from Karl Marx's writings. It's really shocking. And most people are not familiar. Everyone's heard of Mein Kampf. Not many people have heard about Karl Marx's essay on the Jews. And they really need to read it, because in academia right now, most faculty members of the radicals we're talking about, who do these encampments and all these crazy anti-Semitic things, they are actual Marxists. It's not hyperbole. They call themselves Marxists. On my campus, the faculty members actually celebrate Marx's birthday. I have screenshots from social media of faculty on my campus where they are celebrating Marx's birthday. Why? So I always ask myself, and I try to share with people, why Marx? Why that particular stream of communism? Why not any other streams? Because there are so many of communism. And the reason truly is because of Marx's disdain for Judaism. That is really the reason why. And so this intersection of Islamists, right, and they hate the Zionists. And now, I don't know if you saw this, Meir, but Facebook just came out with a major initiative, which I'm so excited about, and I hope other social media companies will follow suit. They are now not allowing people to use the word Zionist as a substitute for Jewish, for Jews or Jewish. That's a very good first step, because it's a recognition that they're using this term as a trope that really just means Jew, and it really just means Jew. A very shocking step that Facebook has taken, but they have recognized something that people like you and I have been yelling about for probably decades, that they understand now, finally, one social media outlet, that the term Zionism is used interchangeably with Jews and Judaism. And so when I talk about Islamo-Marxism, these faculty members have a common goal here. The Marxists want Marxism. That's their main goal. And the Islamists want Jews gone. And Marxists also want that. So right now, they are collaborating really because of one interest in common. One day they will be at direct odds with each other because there's no other overlapping commonality between Marxism and Islamism. But when it comes to the Jewish issue, that's what's really at center stage right now, and they have combined forces on that, and it's scary.
100%. It's not just Facebook; it's Instagram as well.
Good.
And
was that today also?
The same time.
Nice. That's a great start. Great start.
That's right. So myself, together with people that I'm associated with, working with, we're able to get various anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas accounts taken down. And there's a lot more work to do. You take down one, another one comes. So we're working very hard. We're having some success. It's very nice to take away these platforms because they figured that they could reach the masses through social media. And we've had a good effect. Certainly, not too sure how active in the United States Samadon is. Actually, yeah, they are active in New York City with all these pro-Hamas groups there, instigating violence, calls for intifada, praising October 7th. We're very successful getting their YouTube account taken down, and a few other accounts that they have. That's Samadon. I don't know if have you heard of Samadon?
I know I have not.
Check them out. Check them out. In Europe, in fact, in Germany, they listed them as a terrorist organization. Israel certainly has listed Samadon as a terrorist organization a few years ago as a front for the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The two heads of it, Khaled Barakat and his wife, Charlotte Cates, they run it, and my God, they show up at Al-Quds Day rallies and other rallies, and they're just promoting terrorism and celebrating October 7th. They think it was the greatest achievement. Look at their achievements. Hamas butchering Jews. They could care less really about the Israeli response to that. They know there's going to be a response, but their sole objective is, can they kill Jews? Don't think about building an economy. You look at Gaza. I mean, what kind of people is this? Beachfront, gorgeous beachfront, potential. They talked about when Israel was planning to withdraw from Gaza that Gaza could become the Singapore of the Middle East. It could. Look at Lebanon. Lebanon was like the Paris of the Middle East till Hezbollah came there. Everything Iran touches turns to garbage because they're fixated on they have to murder Jews and destroy Israel. What a culture. And when they march, ceasefire, intifada, revolution, these guys are animals. There's no talk. Two-state solution? Are you kidding? I've never heard once the word peace from these people. They're monsters. Hard to call them people if that's their vocabulary. Intifada, revolution. They take no responsibility for October 7th unless it's to gloat and brag about how they butchered, and they live streamed it. I'll never forget seeing it. They live streamed it. They were ecstatic about it, and their support network throughout North America and in Europe, but in North America in particular, I remember the rallies they had. I saw them hours after the attack. Certainly in Canada, they had celebrations. And then the next day, they had massive celebrations at City Hall in Toronto. Sure, you had the same thing there in New York City and other cities in the United States. And the progressives prior to this that were in the wrong, and we should feel ashamed, and Zionism should be like almost like a dirty name. We're colonialists. Look at a map of the Middle East. Massive Arab countries, almost the same size as the United States, the Middle East, the Arab Islamic Middle East. And little tiny Israel, I don't even think it's the size of New Jersey. And they go on about the occupation and divide the land. It's too big. There was a two-state solution proposed prior to Israel becoming a state. In 1947, the UN proposed. The Jews said, okay, we'll divide it. It would have been a smaller Israel, and there would have been whatever they want to call it, Disneyland, Palestine, whatever they want to call it. We said, okay. They said no, they went to war. They lost badly. against Jews who, and remember, that was 3 years after the Holocaust, Jews who joined what became the IDF, Holocaust survivors joining, fighting against 5 Arab armies and Arabs inside the land of Israel. And the Jews won. They call it the Nakba. They can't stand it that Jews won. And to this day, they don't talk about occupation since 67 or anything like that. Occupation since 48, the very existence. They want their march of return. They had that a number of years ago, marching right to the fence of Gaza, meeting Israel proper, that they have the right to invade Israel just like they did on October 7th. Well, no. The message of the Holocaust is certainly never again. And thank God we have an IDF and young Jews in Israel after October 7th, answering the call of duty, beyond the call of duty, something to be so proud of. But we didn't choose this war. That's all they want. War and war and war with their demand for an intifada. You hear this on your campus.
Yeah, well, on, I believe it was October 8th, maybe October 9th, but I think it was actually October 8th, 9th, I'm not sure. On the campus of Brooklyn College, there was a vigil that was being held by a Jewish professor and Jewish students, a vigil for those lost on October 7th in that massacre, with candles, very peaceful. And remember, this is days before Israel even had a thought of having one single bullet enter Gaza. And this vigil was protested by radical Islamists. The vigil was protested. And a colleague and friend of mine sent me a video of this. I couldn't believe it. I went on Fox News and I brought the video and they aired it. And this is what you're talking about, that, and this is why Facebook, and I think Instagram's owned by Facebook, right? So that's probably why it's both of them. Yeah. But this is, I think, why maybe people are starting to wake up to what's really going on here, what these radicals really want. It's not about Israeli policy. It's about, we don't want Jews here, period. Yeah. That's what it is. And I think people are starting to recognize that, and that's why they're, coming down on this term. And I hope it spreads, this idea spreads of not allowing the word Zionist to be used interchangeably with Jew. But I don't know if you saw this recently, and this might sound silly, but I think it's endemic of a much larger problem that's becoming too common. And that is in the Marvel cinematic universe. I don't know if you like those movies or like superheroes, right. But a couple of years ago, Marvel announced that they would have their first Jewish Israeli superhero named Sabra. Right. Now, Sabra has been around for a while. She's an actual Marvel character from the comic books, and she's a Mossad agent and a proud Israeli. And Marvel was going to introduce her into their universe in a new movie coming out in 2025 called Captain America: Brave New World. And they announced this a couple of years ago, and they cast Shira Haas, well-known Israeli actress, very talented, proud Israeli, for the role. And just a couple of days ago, it came out that they changed the character completely, took away her Israeli identity. She's no longer Israeli, took away her Israeli Jewish identity, and she's now a Russian agent in the movie. Oh. And I had two reactions to this. One was utter outrage, at Marvel doing this. Marvel is the home of Mark Ruffalo, who's one of the greatest anti-Semites in America right now. He can hardly go a day without expressing his disdain for Jews and Israel. But the second part of it also bothered me, and not too many people were talking about this. I didn't see anybody talking about this, which is, why did Shira Haas agree to this? It really bothered me, because that's the kind of Jew that you and I talk about, which is the ones who don't speak up. And you so eloquently mentioned how few of us there are, 15 million. We are still today lower than the number we were before the Holocaust.
Right.
Population of Jews in the world, we have not yet gotten back to the number of Jews that existed prior to the Holocaust. That's how bad it is. That's how few Jews there are in the world. That we are still suffering the horrors of the Holocaust because our population is still not what it was before the Holocaust. And Shira Haas, for some reason, decided, fine, become a Russian operative instead of an Israeli superhero. And I thought to myself, it took me a few minutes, Meir, I'll admit, because my first reaction was the typical reaction, which is outrage at this anti-Semitic approach of a company that I like their movies, my kids love their movies. I'm conflicted because they're going to want to go see this movie, and I want to boycott them now.
Right.
But my first reaction was, the typical Jewish erasure. Well, what a surprise from a company that continues to have no consequences at all for Mark Ruffalo and his vile language against Israel. And so much of it are complete lies, too.
Yep.
But what about the Shira Haas side of it? What about the Jewish person? And she has enough cachet, her name, to stand up and say, you know what, then I'm not doing this project. You hired me. She was hired quite literally because she was an Israeli actress.
Yep.
That's why she was hired. That's why she got the job. They specifically at that time hired an Israeli. But then what happens? These Islamist radicals complain, God forbid you should have a Jew in a role like this.
Yep.
Complained about Gal Gadot too. And she wasn't an Israeli character, she was just a Jewish actress. People complained about that. When Wonder Woman came out, I tell you one thing, Gal Gadot would not stand for this. Gal Gadot is a Wonder Woman. If they did this to her, there's no way she would stand for it. So why did Shira Haas stand for it? And why is she floating, completely, untouched? Because to me, I'm almost angrier at her because she should know better. This is an Israeli. This is not just a Jewish Zionist. This is her nationality, and Marvel is saying, we're wiping your nationality out. So now she has to play this role. She has to change her natural voice. She has to change her natural Israeli accent into a Russian one. So she has to hide being Jewish. Does that remind you of anything throughout history? She has to hide.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She has to hide being Jewish for this role. So the more I think about it, the more upset I am at Shira Haas for not being that proud Jew when we need her most to step up and say, I'm not taking this role, Marvel. Screw you. I'm a Jew. I'm an Israeli, and I'm proud of it. Go find somebody else to hide their Jewishness, because I'm not going to do it. But she didn't do that. Doesn't that bother you too?
100%. You know what? After listening to you articulate that, I'm going to be writing about it, and I'll be speaking out. I'm sure you will as well, and we got to make an issue out of this. This is licking the boots of the anti-Semites, and we can't. We just can't. And we can't say, but the bottom line is we got to make money. No. I mean, she's not living in poverty or anything. She's doing well. No, you can't. And you're in the media. The more I think about it, it actually, because there's a religious implication in it as well, because once it becomes public, and is defaming the Jewish people, it becomes an issue of Hillel Hashem versus Kiddush Hashem. You have to stand up. You have to take a stand. And if you don't, it's a Hillel Hashem. It's cursing the Jewish people. It's harmful to the Jewish people. How dare she? And we have other examples of Jews that did step up to the plate. We had an actress a number of years ago when the boycott.
Scarlett Johansson has stood up.
Yeah, she stood up to Oxfam. That's right, and she was proud to do it.
And Gal Gadot has stood up for Israel.
Yes.
And there have been Adam Sandler has stood up. Jerry Seinfeld now has stood up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was taken to task recently. He stood up proudly. Yeah. In fact, when he was interviewed about his last visit to Israel by a former journalist from the New York Times, he got very emotional. Jerry Seinfeld became very emotional about the situation in Israel with Jews, anti-Semitism, and he handles the anti-Semitism as a pro, and that's what we have to do. There's no question about it.
Right. So I'm ashamed of Shira Haas. I think she should be ashamed of herself. They've been filming this movie for a long time, for at least a year. Right. So she's hid this. She has hid this information from the public for a year and got about her job of hiding her Jewishness.
Right.
Does she have no knowledge of Jewish history? How many times this has happened in our history that Jews, I mean, what is a dreidel? Ask her what a dreidel is, what the purpose and need for a dreidel is. Right. Maybe she needs to be taught exactly how Jews have been treated and their identity erased for the thousands and thousands of years that we have been a people. So, I'm so angry at her, and every day that goes by, I feel stronger and stronger about this. And I posted about it on X, and one person wrote, well, it's not her fault. And I say, well, no, part of it is her fault. Because if she would have even said something, that would have caused big problems for Marvel. All she had to do was say, I wasn't comfortable with this because it erased my identity as an Israeli. Yeah. And this character is a legitimately Israeli character. They didn't create a new character. There was an existing Israeli character named Sabra. They also took away her name, by the way, because apparently the word Sabra means something else in some other country. I don't know. Something ridiculous. It's so stupid because that Israel. We all know what Sabra means in Israel. The fruit that's hard on the outside and on the inside, and that's what Israelis see themselves as, and that's how we view Israelis. It's, tough on the outside, but good and earnest and ethical and moral people on the inside. And they took away the name Sabra. They took away her Israeli identity. They told her to hide her accent, for goodness sakes. And she said, okay. So every day that I think about this, I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning and I say, you know what? No, it's wrong what she did. It's wrong.
100%.
And now more than ever, maybe 20 years ago when people didn't realize how bad things were for us as a people, maybe, okay, you want to put food on the table, you want to support your family. Although you're right, she doesn't need it. She's a well-known actress. She's going to get another job in a second. But today, to not do what Adam Sandler and Jerry Seinfeld and Gal Gadot and Scarlett Johansson and all these amazing people came out and realized this is the time to speak up. And it's not like, and they were subjected to neutral situations and they spoke up. She was subjected to a very personal situation. We'll keep you in the movie, Shira Haas. We're not going to fire you. We'll be nice. But you have to pretend not to be Jewish. You have to pretend not to be Israeli. Because we don't want to have an Israeli in our movie. We don't want to have an Israeli person in our movies. How is this not discriminatory? How is it not a lawsuit? Right? Because this character is Israeli in the Marvel universe. By the way, Marvel has a very proud Muslim character named Kamala Khan from Pakistan, and she's a proud Pakistani Muslim. And I say to that, great.
Yep.
Perfect. Fine.
Yep.
That's nice. Celebrate all cultures. So they can have a Muslim character, but they can't have an Israeli Jewish character. So, in my opinion, outrageous from both sides, and shame on Shira Haas. Shame on.
You know what? We got to make this an issue that's not going to go away. Possibly do a whole show devoted to that. And not just leaving it there, but a whole campaign has to be. But it's revolting. It gives power to the Peter Beinarts in the J Streets that we should be ashamed of being Jews and glorify those who want us to be annihilated. It's sickening.
Yeah, you always wonder who would these people be in other generations, in other times, in other difficult Jewish times in history. Who would the Peter Beinarts be? Who would the Peter Haas's be? Because I'm now at that point with her. Because to me, what happened is absolutely disgusting. Imagine you have a professor with an Israeli accent, and the school comes to the professor and says, listen, you can no longer speak in that accent because we don't want to make it seem like we have Israelis teaching here. What's the difference? Harvard did it the same thing. They had an Israeli character. Now they say they don't want Israeli characters. To me, this is discriminatory. To me, there's a basis here for a discrimination claim, and instead Shira Haas goes along with it. So I'm ashamed of her. And, people like you and I who have a lot more to lose than Shira Haas. Shira Haas has plenty of money, plenty of job opportunities. You and I don't. You and I come on here and we speak openly about this and proudly about it because we understand the consequences. So to see someone with the privilege of Shira Haas not speak up is particularly frustrating. I think that's why I'm so upset. You know what? I think I just realized on air with you why I'm so upset about this. Because I have so much to lose for what I'm doing and very little to gain.
Yep.
Right? You and I do this for future generations and for kids. And then I see someone like Shira Haas, and people like Gal Gadot make me so proud because they use their positions of acclaim and fame and stardom to actually bring beauty to what Israel really is, to what Israeli people really are. And then you have Shira Haas, who just goes along with the most despicable thing that Marvel could do to Jewish people. But I think I'm so upset about it. I think more than the typical person, because I risk my career every single day coming on shows like this.
Yep.
And, I've been on many different podcasts and shows and on big networks and little networks. And I've written articles and op-eds, and you've done the same. You've done the same, probably much more so even than me. And you and I understand that we're doing this not to benefit ourselves. We're doing this out of a feeling of that we are actually privileged to be able to talk about this. It's a privilege to be able to work to finally get the Jewish people, not looked at in the way we've been looked at for thousands of years. And then Shira Haas comes along in the middle of the worst anti-Semitic crisis of our lifetime, at least of my lifetime. I'm not going to compare it to what my grandparents went through, but in my lifetime, this is the worst anti-Semitic national crisis and global crisis, clearly a global crisis. And she doesn't just remain silent, she goes along with the people who want to erase her Jewish identity. So, when people who are talking about this, who have so much to lose, and are the only reason you and I and so many other people are talking about it is because it's the right thing to do. That's the only reason. And then
let's, if you are available, let's do another show next week, exclusive about that.
Okay.
We're going to make memes. We'll start a campaign. I believe it will expand, because I believe explaining it this way will resonate with many, many Jews and supporters of Israel, non-Jews also who support Israel. It will resonate. Let's start this campaign. Let's change it. What do you say?
Yeah. I'm with you, Meir.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so
let me ask you a question. Can I be the interviewer for once?
Absolutely.
What would have happened if Marvel said to Kamala Khan, the Pakistani Muslim superhero, if they made a movie, they actually made a major budget film with her as the key character, with Captain Marvel. She was Miss Marvel, so the Muslim Pakistani character was Miss Marvel, and Captain Marvel was the previous hero in the previous universe. They made a major budget motion picture with her in it. What would have happened if they had went to the character, the actress, I forget her name, I'm sorry, who played Kamala Khan, and they said to her, you know what? For the movie, things are kind of controversial right now. We don't really want you to be a Muslim character anymore, a Pakistani Muslim. We're going to make you, a Russian and atheist character for the movie. What would have happened?
There would be riots.
Yeah, there would be riots. There would be riots, 100%.
Absolutely.
Would CARE not speak out?
Oh.
So where's the ADL with Shira Haas?
Right.
Where are all the Jewish organizations? Where are so if you agree with me, and I totally agree with what you just said, there would be riots and CARE and a million other Islamist organizations would come out and go nuts if they took away a Muslim character and no longer made her Muslim, no longer allowed her to be a Pakistani Muslim. Where are the Jewish organizations on this? Where is the ADL? Where are all these? Where are they?
They're the useless groups are nowhere. But we're going to light a fire on this, and it's going to be a huge issue.
Good.
It will snowball.
It should be. Jews need to understand Jewish people need to understand we are in serious danger, more than any time in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
And they don't. She clearly doesn't.
Right.
And that's very unfortunate and dangerous.
We'll get it going. Listen, we've been on for an hour already. I appreciate everything you said. I appreciate you joining. We'll do it next week. We'll pick a day, and we'll get promotion going about that issue. 100%. It's a huge issue, and it really speaks to the heart of what's going on right now. Whether you stand with us or not with us, and whether you're by being silent is emboldening anti-Semitism, and silence does embolden anti-Semitism. There's no question about it. Jeff, final words before we sign off.
We never did Trump. Can I say one thing about Trump? Do we have enough time?
Yes.
When the Democrats and the media for 8 years lied about what Trump said in Charlottesville, and please, if anybody still does not know what Trump said in Charlottesville, there's a transcript of it. There's video of it. He never, ever said that white supremacists or neo-Nazis or Nazis are very fine people. He said the exact opposite. He said the opposite. He condemned those people. He said 100%. There were people who were good people there who were only there because of the statues that were being torn down. Yep. Go with what he said. So when you lie about that, when you call him Hitler, when you lie about that he's going to destroy democracy, which is ridiculous. He was the president already, people forget, for 4 years. Democracy still exists, all fine and good in America, right? When you lie about all these different things and you take it to a hyper rhetoric like that, it is not in the least bit surprising. When you call him Hitler, when you say he's literally Hitler, Hitler, some people say. When you do that, surprising at all that somebody's going to say, we can't have, I got to take action. I got to do something. We can't have our next president be Hitler.
100%. Yeah,
so and then Joe Biden goes on TV 2 nights ago and he says all this stuff again. He said the Charlottesville thing again, the lie of Charlottesville. He said it again. So he puts out a speech that he clearly didn't write. I don't think he has the ability to write a speech anymore. He clearly wasn't even familiar with what he read off of the teleprompter 2 nights earlier, because he comes on TV and starts the hyper rhetoric. You know, he says in his prepared speech that someone else wrote, we got to lower the political temperature. Then he goes on TV with Lester Holt and he says that Trump said Nazis were very fine people. He never said that. He said the opposite. He literally said the opposite of that. If you don't believe me, look it up.
100%. 100%.
So there, and that's when you have people who say, you know what, I got to take action. We can't have a president that's Hitler.
Right.
So that's my take on that. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you as always, Mayor. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
We'll do it next week. Thank you. Shalom, shalom, everyone. Bye-bye.